Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is actually solving these expressions. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a couple different reminders to tell you guys kind of how to do this. So you'll see that this first one is negative 4x. When you see a number that is right next to a variable, that just means that it's that number multiplied by that variable. And that's because when I look at it like this, if I have 3x plus 2, you guys just did a quiz over this so you know how this works. You're going to get 3 times the x and the 3 times the 2. So when I distribute that, my answer is going to be 3x, which just means the same as 3 times the x, and then 3 times 2 plus 6. So remember that when you see a number next to a variable like this, that just means that they're multiplying by each other. Also remember of your order of operations. That's why we went over it. So you do parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, adding and subtracting. So those are what we're going to do. While we're doing this, I want you guys to always be careful of what you're writing down for your story. I'm going to be looking pretty carefully at your story. What the story is that's just what you're doing. So what you're going to do here is you are going to take negative 4 times x. So you can write that a couple different ways. You can go negative 4 times x, or you can say negative 4 multiplied by x. They're both the same thing. They mean the same thing, whatever you're more comfortable with. Then what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put my number, which is negative 6, in for x. So I'm taking negative 4 times x. So I'm taking negative 4 times a negative 6. And that is 24. Now this next one is a little different. It's the opposite. So we're already given the story and you need to write down the expression. So what my story is, subtract 5 from x. So when it's saying that we're adding or subtracting a number from something, that means that that something is going to go first. So my x is going to go first because that's what I'm taking it away from, and I'm subtracting 5. So subtract 5 from x, that's what I wrote right here. I'm just going to put my negative 6 in for an x. So negative 6 minus 5 equals, since they're both negative, my answer is going to be more negative, negative 11. Let's look at this one. So this is 2 different steps. So it's going to be 2 different things that we're doing. When you see a negative sign in front of an x and you don't see a number there, that just means that there's a negative 1 there. Just like here, when there's no number in front of it, that just means that that's a regular x. That's 1x. So I can rewrite this as negative 1x plus 2. Now I'm going to write the story. There are a couple different ways that we can do this. I'll write down both ways and you can decide what you like better. The first one is I'm going to take negative 1 times x. So I would take negative 1 times x. Then my next step is then add 2. Some of you might have heard it being said a little bit differently. So how I'm going to say it from now on, this is what it means, but what I'm going to say is that with this negative 1, or if I see this negative sign, I'm just changing the sign. So what I'm going to do is change the sign, and then the last thing I'm going to do, then add 2. So let's do that. My x is negative 6, so the first thing I'm going to do is change the sign. So it's just going to be 6, and then I'm going to add 2. 6 plus 2, my answer is 8. The next one, I'm already given the story, now we're going to write the expression. So there are 2 different parts to this. The first part is I'm going to multiply by 2, so that's part number 1. the second part is I'm going to add 5. So let's do this first one. Multiply by 2. So I'm going to take my x and I'm going to multiply by 2. 2x. My second part, add 5 plus 5. So here's my x. It's -6. The first thing I'm going to do is multiply by 2. 2 times -6. The next thing I'm going to do is add 5. My order of operations from up here, I know that before I can add and subtract, I need to multiply or divide. So I'm going to do my multiplication first. 2 times -6 is -12 plus 5. That is going to equal -7. And you can just put that in a calculator if you want to. Let's do the next one. This one is also going to be 2 different steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with my numerator, my numbers that are on top. So I'm going to deal with what's directly affecting my x first. So my first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 times x. 3 times x. And since this is a fraction, what that means, what this right here just means is that I'm dividing. So my second step is divide by 2. Over here, I'm going to just write that down. I'm going to take 3 times x. My x is a -6, so 3 times -6. Then I'm going to divide that by 2. So 3 times -6 is -18. Now for my second step, divide by 2. -18 divided by 2. And that is -9. So that's how I do that. I just did both steps. We just got 2 more to do, and then you guys are going to do the back on your own. I am going to grade this when I get back. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to subtract 3 from x. Well, when I say that's the first thing you're going to do, that's the only step here. So we're going to subtract 3 from x. Now remember, because of this from, that means I'm taking 3 away from x. So my x is going to go first, x minus 3. All right, let's just do it. Subtract 3 from x. So -6 minus 3 equals -9. Now let's do our last one. We have 10 plus 3x. You need to remember that what you're going to do first, your first step, because of my order of operations, I have to multiply and divide before I can add and subtract. So I'm going to take this step and I'm going to do this one first. I am going to, the first thing I'm going to do is multiply by 3. That's the first thing I'm going to do because of my order of operations. The second thing I'm going to do is 10. Now let's just go ahead and put that in. Let's change our x to -6. So the first thing I'm doing, multiplying by 3. 3 times -6. That equals 18. Oh, I'm sorry, -18 because I have a -6. Second step, add 10. -18 plus 10. You can put that in your calculator. That is a -8. So that's how you're going to do all of these. Make sure you're writing down your story very detailed. I want to know each step you're going through, and then just put the number in. So if we look at the back, here's our first one. Remember, when I have this negative sign, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the sign. So the first step is change the sign, and the next step right here is add 2. So let's just put our 5 in. So I'm going to take my 5 and I'm going to change the sign, which is going to turn it into -5. My second step, I'm going to add 2. So that's going to equal 3. That's how you're going to do all of these, and then you're going to turn them in and I'm going to grade them. Good luck. Have fun. Oops. -3.